Hi, all. Very good morning or good evening. Thanks a lot for joining this great session on cybersecurity awareness, a necessity in the ever-changing threat landscape. So this topic is specifically chosen to coincide with the Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So we have four eminent leaders joining this panel discussion today. Let me take a moment to introduce them. So first we have Besa. So she's a CAO at a Jewish board. Besa is a data and analytics executive with a laser focused commitment to enhancing the health services, program efficiency, and process improvement. With a background compassing disciplines such as health services, public health, quantitative and qualitative social research, Besa brings in a rich and diverse range of knowledge to our panel discussion. Her commitment to betterment of health services through data-driven insights and evidence-based interventions demonstrates her dedication to improving the well-being of individuals and communities. Welcome, Besa. So next, we have Nazila. So Nazila is the VP and IT of Information Security at Footprint, and with a remarkable career of spanning over 25 years. So Nazila professional journey is characterized by a proven track record of consistently defining and driving strategic agendas while delivering exceptional business outcomes. Her expertise extends across a diverse range of domains, including program management, IT infrastructure and operations, governance and compliance, mergers and acquisitions, continuous process improvement, and relentless pursuit of customer excellence. Welcome, Nazila. Next, we have Inder. So Inder is a vice president of information technology and CAO at Englewood Health. He spearheads IT initiatives, digital transformation, and strategies for health systems, which includes a hospital of approximately 100 locations and urgent care centers, all integrated under one medical record systems. Inder actively participates in healthcare and technology conferences, contributes to media journals, and serves on advisory boards, including New York HIMSS Leadership Committee and Stillman School of Business at Seton Hall University. Inder's distinguished career and visionary leadership have earned him a reputation as a driving force in the intersection of healthcare and technology. We eagerly anticipate his insight on today's panel discussion. Welcome, Inder. So next we have Howard. So Howard currently, he's a director of information security at embecta, where he has significantly strides in fortifying digital defenses, establishing segmented architecture, and ensuring compliance security measures for the last 18 months there. Before embarking on his current role at embecta, he dedicated 3 years to a private equity owned company where he undertook the formidable task of building their security capabilities and organizational structure from the ground up. With an immense career, that spans nearly more than 2 decades, Howard has demonstrated this, its commitment to ever-evolving field of information technology, information security. So, welcome, Howard. So, thank you all. Thank you so much for joining this panel discussion. Let me start with the first question for the day, and that is, so could you please share your insights on increase in cybersecurity attacks in your respective industry? So how the threat landscape has changed in your respective industry? Maybe we would like to start with Nazila first. Nazila, could you kindly share your thoughts?
Hi, Nan. Good morning, good evening, good day, everyone. First of all, thank you for hosting the session and then pulling the panel together. I'm fortunate and honored to be sitting with with all the panelists here. I come from Footprint. So Footprint, we say we're a material science organization. We design, develop, and manufacture plant-based fiber solutions, right? Our immediate mission is to eliminate the single-use plastic from planet. So, we have patented technologies and solutions and formulas in terms of how to create those products. So we are a manufacturing organization. If you look at it, the manufacturing industry has seen an increase in cyber attacks. And I would say, this trend is driven by several different factors. Manufacturing industry, similar to some of the other industries, is going through digital transformation, Industry 4.0, right? The whole industrial revolution, the IoT. So the whole connectivity and automation, while it benefits the manufacturing industry tremendously, right, from bringing operational benefits, it also expands the attacks that you can see in the manufacturing industry. And the other one, I talked about Footprint being a material science company, and then so we have patented technology, meaning that we have a lot of valuable data, right? So our intellectual property, these are like our manufacturing processes, the proprietary designs that we have. All of this is critical for us. It's not just while the PII, all of those information is important, but within manufacturing, we also have critical and valuable data that we need to make sure that it gets secured. The other one is the whole supply chain vulnerabilities, right? The manufacturing industry relies heavily on a complex global supply chain. And then, today the bad guys and the criminals, they're going over the whole interconnected supply chain to impact, right, the whole manufacturing industry. So that's another challenge, especially if you're sourcing and from multiple locations. While manufacturing industry is also moving in towards automation, they're also one of the organizations that they have a lot of outdated systems, right, which creates a lot of challenges in terms of like vulnerabilities and then compliance. And I would say, last but not least, in terms of security awareness, right? So employees in the manufacturing area, they may not necessarily be aware of everything else that's going on in terms of like cyber threats compared to some of your traditional, you can say, right, some of the tech-focused sectors. So that also brings additional challenges.
Besa, would you like to share your thoughts, please?
So thanks, Nazila. Actually, I kind of agree with many things that you said. In my sector, which is healthcare, I think that all of the data is PHI and PII, and obviously it's very sensitive information. What we've seen across the board is higher attacks to the human services as well as the healthcare sector, because those have been sectors that don't really have really strong cybersecurity practices in the past. I think we're learning fairly quickly, how to catch up. So if you compare us to finance, we're highly regulated. If you compare us to technology, those divisions and those industries had done much more work in this arena. I think from the healthcare end is that we're learning as we're going. And one of the things I think a lot of the cyber criminals have figured out is that there's a treasure trove regarding healthcare data. Recently, there was an attack on 23andMe where genomics data was extracted, I think over 1 million, profiles. And I had a conversation with my colleague the other day. They're like, why genomics data? And what's really fascinating is that, like one profile was going, I think, over like $1,000 on the dark web, much more than just other types of PII or PHI data or any other types of information. So obviously there's value in the healthcare data as far as utilization of this information multiple times and extraction of this information. And I was just thinking as far as how else can this information, healthcare information, be exploited? And it can. I look at it in a way that if you have, your healthcare information, pretty much where you work, what your healthcare status is. It's a treasure trove of information that can be used and reused over and over again. So from the healthcare side, I think it's definitely a challenge for us, especially now with the AI. The typical stuff that we see in the past is really being upserved with a lot of the AI-based technologies that are kind of circumnavigating a lot of the cybersecurity postures that we have, and is really keeping us on our toes as far as how do we address these things and how do we ensure that our patient data. So when I think of myself as a patient first. I definitely don't want my information to be exposed out there. What does that mean for my career? What does that mean for my work? And then, how do we do this in a way that we have patients and clients as well as systems in mind? I think is definitely a challenge for the healthcare sector.
Okay, got it. Thanks, Besa. That was great. Inder, would you like to share your thoughts, please?
Sure. Thank you, Kannan, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this webinar. I think it is interesting to hear, right, the kind of threats Nazila mentioned and kind of threats Besa and I deal with are same, but slightly different impact. While for most industries, cyber attacks are probably white collar crime, for healthcare, this is way beyond that. It's almost like it's a threat to the life crimes because it really threatens our ability to provide patient care or maybe put patient safety at risk. So all of the factors are same across industries, how it can disrupt, how the data could be shared, how the data needs to be protected. But what healthcare has been dealing, and specifically since, unfortunately, COVID-19 outbreak, I think that was one pivot point for bad actors to really attack hospitals when they were already under an extreme burden of both patient care resources and dealing with the public health crisis. And they treated pandemic as an opportunity to exploit, victimize, and profit from health systems. So healthcare organizations have, as Besa mentioned, the information is of very high monetary and intelligence values, right? Because it's protected health information. We also have financial information about patients, their credit cards and all those numbers. We have other sort of what we call as PII, right? Personally identifying information, Social Security, and also all of those make it a big target. And I'm not saying the other industries don't have it, but somehow healthcare, I feel, has a greater burden because even in bad actors' world, the healthcare data is more valuable than, let's say, financial data, and that's not where it ends. For us, the cost to remediate those attacks or those infractions is about 3 times higher than rest of the industry, and that's because of the nature of business we have and how we operate. So, the second part really of your question is like, how does it impact our employees? And it impacts our employees for most part as how it impacts other industries' employees. But a couple of differences here. One, we deal with a very diverse workforce, which is, Nazila also mentioned in manufacturing, not all the workforce is tech savvy. Here, I would not say that they are tech savvy or not, but their primary part of their job is not to be interacting with tech, but patient care and clinical care. And really, they're not glued to a computer all day to consume all this information and be more aware. So their interaction is in their personal lives and, of course, within the protected environment we have. So we have that challenge compared to several other more tech-savvy industries. And by that nature also, many of our workforce has limited IT background because, again, they are there for the clinical expertise. IT is a tool, or technology is a tool they use to deliver their clinical expertise. And I'll say one more thing that is different is that there's always that aspect of balancing patient care and security, right? And we cannot keep all the information behind closed doors, like maybe financial institutions may be able to do it, because that data is key for delivering the best patient care, the most safe patient care. So data accessibility has to be there. Then there's an additional responsibility of relying on a good practice, the best behavior. So those are the challenges we or I face, and maybe Besa and other healthcare leaders face in their space of really delivering patient care balanced with how to be most safe and secure and keep our assets safe.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Inder. Thanks for the great inputs. Howard, we would like to hear from you on your thoughts, please.
Sure. And thanks for inviting me to participate in this webinar. I think, as Nazila said, the manufacturing industry in general is seeing an increase in the volume and the sophistication of attacks. But I want to talk a little bit about just a particularly concerning increase that we've been seeing over the last really 12 months, and that's around access broker services. So these are services which harvest and provide or sell initial access onto other threat actors. And these access broker services, they're effectively criminal organizations whose main goal is to get into your organization to gain access so that can then be utilized by another party. We've seen some really interesting methods and some really interesting developments in how that's being achieved. There's a lot of social engineering around even calling people on telephone calls. The data on who they're actually going to target and how they're going to access these systems, that intelligence is gathered from LinkedIn, it's gathered from other social media platforms. So they really know who they're kind of going after. And because the corporate email systems are so well protected now and the technologies are so good, they're kind of pivoting away and going to SMS, to WhatsApp, to personal emails. As I mentioned before, even calling people directly. So as an impact on the employee, we're having to look at far stricter applications of MFA and access control policies, and really kind of working on education with the employees and trying to get the understanding for the employees of why this additional security is being put in place. Trying to kind of work the message that security is never convenient, but trying to kind of build the understanding across the organization of why these things are being applied. And then, once that initial access has been provided, that I think there's a general shift in what threat actors are trying to do. The traditional deactivation of antivirus and firewall technologies, log tampering efforts, that kind of thing. It seems to have pivoted more to data theft and extortion, not necessarily with ransomware. So that's really interesting, because initially the data theft and extortion was a secondary part of a ransomware attack. It was just used as an additional lever to get an organization to pay. But what has started to kind of happen, I believe, from the intelligence that we see within the industry, is that data theft in itself is a big enough lever to have organizations pay. So the ransomware piece is kind of dropping by the wayside in some cases. I mean, that said, earlier this year, there was a defense evasion tool, AutoKill, which had the ability to shut down antivirus, anti-malware platforms. I think the only requirement for that to function was administrative privileges. So another kind of risk and something that's had to be addressed within organizations is looking at how many users have administrative privileges and how you can manage those administrative privileges to balance that risk.
Yeah, thanks, Howard. That's a great. So just to summarize, right? Like, I mean, the key challenges mainly because, like, I mean, if you take manufacturing, is the IP, right? Like, I mean, if the intellectual properties. And when it comes to healthcare, the key challenges are like, how do you protect the patient information? Because dark web, the moment you sell it, like, it's number one, like, there is a huge market, and they sell it at a very, very high price. But this also results in a lot of complaints related, penalties, leading to reputational damage, right? Like, and it also gives a impression to let's say if I'm a patient, right? Hey, what happens to my data? Like, is it secure? It creates that kind of an anxiety in the users as well. So thanks for that. And let's move on to the next topic, and that is, so for the challenges, right? Like, you face in addressing these, the threat attacks, right? What is the impact on your employees, right? Like, how does it impact your employees? Maybe we'd like to hear from you, Howard, first.
Yeah, sure. I think in terms of how we deal with it, I think the initial challenge is getting engagement from employees who have competing priorities and workloads. From a security perspective, we want to classify information, we want to challenge data sprawl, but from a business perspective, quite often, they want to report on data. They need that data in order to drive the business functions. So, getting that engagement and understanding the priorities and the competing priorities, and then working with the organization to figure out the best and the safest way to achieve what the business needs to do and to support them. That's so important. And you need to get the balance right. We don't want to scaremonger. We don't want to just be continually waving red flags and saying, no, you can't do that. That's not what it's about at all. But we do need to try and educate and drive an acceptance of a level of responsibility. We need data to be seen as a company asset, and that kind of level of responsibility to be understood by anybody who is handling that data, that asset. Also targeting the correct users for relevant training. If you have a particular bunch of people who are dealing with PII, then they should get more training for dealing with PII than a group of users who don't deal with that type of information on a regular basis. And having a way of kind of assessing that as well.
Great inputs, Robert. Maybe we'll move on to Nazila. Nazila, would like to hear from you. Nazila?
Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So, I think I agree with some of the items that Howard mentioned in terms of just implementing the, I would say, cyber awareness in manufacturing, right? It's going to have several challenges with respect to the employees. We talked about balancing the security with productivity. We don't necessarily want the we want employees, we want the users to see security as enabler versus disabler, right? So you have to balance that so that you're still letting the business operate, but you're also securing them in the background, right? So the integration with OT and also security for IoT devices, it provides a lot of challenges, right? So the OT systems, they control the physical processes within manufacturing industry, but those are also providing some additional challenges and additional constraints that we want to make sure that, right? So we're securing these devices, we're integrating them into the broader security framework, right? That can be protected. And there's also, right, the disruption, right? The operational disruption within the manufacturing area, right? You can't. It's really hard whenever we're trying to get a downtime from the business. You need to coordinate because any downtime impacts ultimately the profitability of the business. So we want to make sure that we're sensitive to these disruptions, but along the same token, you want to make sure that you're you're keeping the organization secure. And you also have a lot of technology diversity that you need to deal with, right? We deal with the wide range of technologies, right? We have antiquated systems, right? Legacy systems, but you also have automations, and then some of the newer technology too. That how do you strike those balance? And I would say last but not least is just limited IT expertise that you have, right? So not everybody is going to have those extensive IT knowledge to know that what needs to get done. So, providing those relevant information, right? That's accessible training for the employees, that you can educate them, you can tailor it based on, their specific roles and responsibilities. That's going to be a challenge.
Great insights, Nazila. Maybe Besa, we'd like to hear from you.
So I like both what Howard and Nazila said. I think in my perspective is that I think everybody needs to have baseline cybersecurity data education. Otherwise, what we've seen is that, bad threat actors actually look across the organization. They're not going to look at your administrators. They're going to look at what is your weakest link and then tunnel in. So what we really like to do is actually I look at it almost like as a shield across the organization. And usually what happens is that individuals down the organization are the ones that are being targeted the most. And I was looking at statistics, a few days ago, as far as, how do these threat actors gain access? And what's really interesting is that even though we have AI and, MFA and all of this, the way a lot of the penetration through organizational channels is via email, which I thought it was like, I'm like, this hasn't really changed. I know that Howard raised, the whole other aspect of, taking opportunity through SMS. I find it a little bit more difficult. Usually those messages that come through, people are able to identify, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. But what we've seen recently is that individuals and threat actors actually calling, trying to reset individual passwords and pretending to be that user by exactly what Howard said, looking at social media, looking at other things, trying to create a user profile, and then guesstimating what the user would, what types of accounts they would have in order to gain access to those accounts, which I thought it was pretty novel in a way to do that. So I think for us, what we're seeing is that the points of penetration and access are across the board. So it's not just email. We're seeing, phone calls. We're seeing SMS. We're seeing, kind of testing of networks and trying to look at vulnerabilities that way. And trying to figure out, what is the weakest point to enter the organization and find a way to kind of either tunnel in. Another thing that I've seen recently is that, especially with the current AI technologies, sort of putting in different bugs within systems and letting them sit and wait, and then wait until, changes in systems or technologies, and then taking into account and a way to have those systems be compromised over time. And that was sort of what happened with MGM Graham and a few others, that you have these sort of sleeper kind of, cells sitting and waiting and not really attacking the organization, but learning, over time. And our systems, even our, advanced cybersecurity system, don't always pick those things up, which is really hard. How do you, play a cat and mouse game where you're always trying to figure out, where the vulnerability is? And some really novel vulnerabilities, I think a lot of the time I'm like, oh my gosh, like that is pretty clever. I would have never thought of that. So I think for us, as I mentioned prior, that, the majority of it is the social engineering part, as far as how do you get access. Very rarely do, the cyber criminals attack, networks, because they're very well protected. It requires a lot of, resources, a lot of infrastructure to, kind of pull down a large scale network. And in those cases, usually those are, state actors or state threats where there's a target and you have a group of individuals or cyber individuals with bad intentions, kind of, targeting systems on purpose. But within the healthcare organization is usually, few threat actors. But the problem is that across the globe, we're seeing a lot of nefarious activity with bad actors from all over the globe. So it's not just within the US, it's outside of the US, it's outside globally. So if you have multiple individuals globally trying to access your system from India, China, Korea, US, everywhere else, we've seen, Finland, other places where you're like, what, that scale becomes greater. So if you have an influx from all these individuals, somebody will get through. It's just sort of a numbers games and a statistics game. So it's definitely a challenge for the healthcare sector. Yeah. But I'll let Inder sort of, kind of put his 2 cents of the, what he's seeing.
Great, Besa, thank you. Howard, we would like to hear from you. Sorry, Inder, we would like to hear from you.
Sure. I think my fellow panelists covered all of the points which are relevant to every industry. But I would start by saying, right, the weakest link in our cybersecurity defense is humans. We all have gotten to the point of securing our perimeter, securing our networks, and like Besa said, right, that's like expensive and extensive operation to bring that down. But it's much easier to plan a social engineering attack, like what happened at MGM or other institutions, or to impersonate an employee, or to figure out a way to get into the system as an insider and do the harm. And that's where I think the challenge comes for most of us. I'm not saying that our technology is 100% foolproof, but for most part, I think we can rely on the fact that computer doesn't come with its own brain. Well, maybe that statement is not true anymore with all the AI, but for most part, right, it's how we program, and it will continue to behave the way we program it, how we set up our defenses. But the human behavior is unpredictable. And that's where the challenge comes. So how do you solve that, right? And that is really where the crux of the matter is: cybersecurity awareness training. And it's not just because today is, cybersecurity month. Every day is a cybersecurity awareness day. Every day we need to be vigilant. And in my industry, I brought up like a couple of points earlier in my last response, right, which are unique to me, because my workforce is not connected and sitting at computer and doing this as their primary job. They have a different role, but they need to interact with information. They need to interact with my system. So really, I need to make sure all of my IT staff is aware and educated of potential risks. So it's something which needs to be a consistent messaging, and that's what we use. Then sorry, go ahead.
Thanks, Inder. That's a great insight. So just to summarize, right, on the key challenges, as Inder, you rightly said, humans are the weakest link, right? A simple phishing email, like Besa and Nazila mentioned, right? It's so easy for someone to just get a phishing email, click on it, and it takes your user ID and password and able to get into your systems. And what I've also seen is even the admins, right? Many times they miss to adhere to the process, right? Let's say if I call someone, like Besa said, hey, I call someone to reset my password. If the engineer is not validating if the user is the right person and changes the password without prior, proper validation, then again, hackers can gain access into your systems. So great insights. And thanks for this. Let's move on to the next one, right? With the challenges. So how do we deal with that, right? How do we make sure our employees are given the right awareness so that they know how to deal with it, act with the due care? So start with Inder, we'd like to hear from you, please.
So, the one challenge I always have is, right, to protect the sensitive patient data and continue to maintain the integrity of my health system, right? That is what I'm always trying to solve, right? So few strategies which have worked. Somebody mentioned earlier 2 customized training programs. So really a role-specific training, where, and I deal with a workforce which has very diverse roles. and for rightful reasons. I just, experience of a nurse may be different than experience of an IT person or experience of a finance person. So I need to customize a training program for them. Of course, has to be done frequently. And interactive learning. So no one is going to sit through a 20-minute video. No one is going to sit through a half-an-hour class. But if I can make a 10 minutes interactive video, and we deploy those things, phishing simulation exercises, like if you accidentally click on it, there is a 2-minute interactive video right then and there, giving you education of what were the red signals in this email, which you could have picked on. We should have a clear policy, and the punitive effect of not following the adherence to those policies about use of protected health information, both within the organization and outside. One critical function for any organization is a leadership level support. I would like to believe the boards and the senior leadership of every organization is fully aware of the dangers, of the effects, of the potential impact on the operation because of cybersecurity attacks. So I think that is, we probably have, because of the environment we all have the senior leadership support. And then really keep communicating, blast it out, multiple channels, emails, newsletters, posters, staff meetings, because again, everything has to be at least conveyed 3 times for it to stick, but more importantly, it just needs to be conveyed repeatedly to all of our constituents. And and lastly, I will say, right, patients also have a role to play in this, in healthcare system, to be part of our data security, because a patient can very easily expose their information, so educating patients as part of this process is something we should look at it. And essentially what we need to do is create a culture of cybersecurity awareness, empower our staff to contribute, and also, if they see something, they should report something. Compliance hotlines are one safe way of doing it if they feel uncomfortable. But we should create a culture of where it's not about pointing fingers. If you think you did something wrong, please bring it up to our attention so we can immediately start investigating and remediating rather than finding it out 2 days later. So that's where the leadership, the culture of organization comes in play in really making cybersecurity everyone's responsibility.
Great inputs, Hinder. You've taken it to the next level, right? Not just employees, your patients also, they should be cyber aware. Thanks for that. Nazila, we'd like to hear from you, please.
So I agree with almost everything that Ender said, with respect to making sure that cybersecurity awareness is not just limited to a month, it's daily and it's ingrained in what employees are doing. So you want to make that part of the standard work, right? The standard operating procedures that they do, because if they're doing the training once a year, it's not going to stick with them. But if that's part of the daily activities that they're doing, and then you can demonstrate the applicability, right? As we talked about within manufacturing, within my business, right? So we have a lot of IP data. So you can start teaching them right on the spot that what it means, and then what are some of the trainings that they have to do in terms of protecting that sensitive data. And then we also talked about bite-sized modules, right? Historically, at the year end, you take everybody through a 2-hour training. It's 2 hours, takes a lot of time. It's boring. You're chasing people. So rather than doing it once in your 365 days of year, right? So also Ender talked about it too. So do bite-sized chunks throughout the year, right? Maybe 5-minute training, 10-minute training throughout the year, and then make them engaging, right? So they talk about the whole gamification. I think most people are competitive. So you can have a leaderboard. You can make it fun, create those type of trainings that it engages your audience so that they want to take those trainings. And I would say do reward and recognition. So, incentivize people for compliance. If people are, and they talk about if you see something, say something. So they're taking these trainings, say, hey, we're going to reward and recognize the top 5 people, right, that took the training on time, or they got the highest score, so that it people are excited and they're looking forward to those trainings. And last but not least, again, I also agree with you overall, leadership support and advocacy, right? Lead by example. So, I mean, this year we started, even this quarter, I would say, we started doing some targeted training and phishing campaigns for the senior leadership team, right? So just making sure that right, not only they're aware, but also, right, that they're also see it, and then they're supporting it, they're talking about it in the in the town hall. So it's applicable to everybody, right? We always talk about it's not if you're going to get hacked or you're going to get breached, it's when you're going to get breached. So you want to make sure at least you've educated, right, your organization with all the right tools to be safe.
Great insights, Nazila. Howard, we would like to hear from you, please.
Yeah, I think Inder mentioned the policies and standards, and I think there's the policies and your standards, they need to be in place. They need to be simplified and easily accessible. And I think one of the most important things there is the fact that it needs to be simplified. If your policies and standards governing what you expect your employees to do and how they need to handle data, if that runs to 20 or 30 pages, then I think that's wrong. I think simplification is the way. If someone can look at a bulleted list and say, okay, right, that's fine, I can understand that, then that's going to get the message across far more easily than a wordy legal document. I think knowing where your most critical data is and targeting those specific employees, we touched on that earlier, but also from an information security perspective, knowing where your most critical data is seems like a really obvious thing that you should know. So I think a lot of organizations really need to be sure that they have that pinned down. And then understanding the compliance requirements. Is it covered by HIPAA, GDPR, PCI? And how you can map those requirements specifically to that data. I think when it comes to training, I think Nazila mentioned brief, short, regular training. I absolutely agree with that. I think regular 60-second learnings, quick videos, just on a far more regular basis. I mean, we've all done the 25, 30-minute clip fests that you have to go through and then do the little quizzes at the end. I'm not a big believer in those because it becomes a tiresome thing that people don't want to remember. Whereas, if you can get the right content, those very quick targeted either videos or animations, I think that works a lot better. Regular postings on your intranet about the type of threats that you're seeing and what you want people to look out for. And again, engaging the employees with that top-down approach, making sure that you've got the full backing of leadership in doing what you're trying to do.
Great. Yeah, I mean, you also brought in the key, right, Howard, I mean, about how do you involve the senior management? That's one of the key, because tone from the top, it makes all the more difference. I mean, Besa, we would like to hear from you, please.
So I think my colleagues kind of covered the whole realms from, incident, the trainings, having shortened trainings, gamification, as Nazila mentioned. I think I'll add one more thing besides gamification, kind of rewards, monetary. So what I've done is that, like you get a gift card if you complete. So there's gamification along with rewards that works beautifully. As Howard said, shorter. I mean, our videos are like 2 minutes, not even, I don't know if I could do it in 60 seconds. I think just by the time you click, but the 2 minutes seems to work really, really well. In addition to all of these, I think having an incident response and disaster recovery and management, kind of having those things across the board mapped out and at the forefront, so your senior leadership understands what that process is, but also not just have it within IT, educate everybody across the board what those standards are and how do individuals respond if there's an incident. What does the disaster recovery management look like to get your users across the board educated on those two things, and have a document that's live and ever changing. I mean, we have newer systems that we put in place. Now we're testing different types of AI system. Your disaster and incident recovery management system will also change. In addition to, as Howard said, really kind of mapping out where your data is. So having a really good data governance program, understanding where your sensitive data, is housed, where it is, and then replicating, creating air gaps, other types of approaches where you're replicating in real time. So if you have a ransomware attack where they shut down your systems, you're able to spin up pretty quickly and resume operations without a lot of damage. And obviously those systems are costly. So healthcare, I'm in that role where we have physicians, we have nurse practitioners. What does the cost look like? So having a large scale system, it's also, there has to be a cost benefit to do that. So each of those, I think, are important to think about.
Yeah, great points. Like, I mean, you brought in the key thing, right? Like, I mean, on the tabletop exercise, kind of like how do you simulate, and they know how to respond, or like, I mean, or whom to reach out in case if there is an incident. So just to summarize, right? Like, I mean, the key points, a lot of great insights, right? I mean, in terms of involving the senior management, tone from the top, customized training, and how do you do the simulation? It's just can't be like one time, like in the said, it has to be like multiple. We have to do it multiple times in small videos, and you also reward them. That's one of the key. Thank you so much for the great insights. Maybe we'll take questions. Let me take the first question from our audience, and that is. So many leaders are concerned about the cost of security, right? Like, I mean, how do we convince the management on cost versus the benefits? So what kind of case studies are, like, I mean, how do you build that business case to convince the leadership? Maybe this is applicable to all. Maybe would like to hear from Howard first. Howard?
Yeah, sure. I think that you're absolutely right, and any business should rightfully have an eye on what they're spending on security and what they're spending on any other area of the business. I think using tabletop exercises, looking at your highlighting your risks, running through tabletop exercises or virtual tabletop exercises, even within the security groups, to say, okay, how will we handle this particular scenario? How does that play through? What does that look like? And then turning that into actionable information. I think if you go to any leader and say, well, I need more money because this new technology has come out and look how cool it is, that's not necessarily the way to approach it. But showing that you have gaps, if you believe you have a gap, if you do have a gap in your security, and then playing the tabletop exercise through and providing that data, I think that goes a long way to do that.
Great. And Nazila, just a question to you, right? I mean, where, let's say, if there is no mandatory compliance requirement, so how do you build this business case and take it up with the management?
So I would say, and you have to speak the business language. So if you can articulate, I think Howard was pointing out as well, right? Articulate the risk to the business, right? You want to put the decision almost back to the business, articulate the risk, right? And then provide them options for mitigation, remediation, right? Or accepting the risk. Right? So you are partnering, you are articulating, but ultimately you're leaving that decision back to the business. And I want to say within footprint, on a quarterly basis. So I present to the board of directors in addition to senior leadership team, and right. I mean, it's very encouraging to see the support, right? Because again, you wanna talk in terms of risks. Again, you're not talking about an open checkbook, but once you're articulating the risk and then giving options, then it's easier to basically get those prioritized and then make sure you're putting focus on it, and then you're also showing progress against, right, the risks that you identified, so that they can see actions are being taken, and then potentially what those are preventing, right? What preventative measures are being put in the organization.
Great, thank you. Maybe this question is to Besa and Inder on the healthcare sector, right? I mean, because the critical medical infrastructure is being used. So what kind of challenges you face in addressing the critical medical infrastructure?
So as Inder knows, we have a lot of legacy systems. I mean, with the electronic health record, there's multiple systems, I think. And the challenge is that even for our staff, they have to navigate multiple systems, and training them on, getting rid of, like right now, my goal is really getting rid of any sort of communication, especially patient-related information, to, take away from email and put it directly into the electronic health record, ensuring communication within the EHR so then the systems or any PHI doesn't go outside of that, kind of locking things down. But that requires a lot of, training for our physicians, our clinicians, our nurses to only communicate this way. So user behavior, I think, is a challenge in the healthcare sector. Some of our systems are too complex. I think that's another challenge that we face. We have legacy systems, and then we have to interact with city, state, and federal systems as well during COVID. And I have colleagues of mine at the CDC, and a lot of those systems haven't been, updated since the 1950s, 1960s. And we had to send things in fax, which that's probably the most secure way if you think about without technology. But really, it's sort of that, updated systems and non-updated system, we're working a fracture kind of environment. In addition to that, I think healthcare is very complex. You have the insurance and payers, data gets sent, all over the place. So really thinking about where the vulnerabilities are, both internally as well as externally within the healthcare system, is definitely a challenge for us.
Yeah, great. Inder, we'd like to hear from you, please.
No, I'll just say that I think we in healthcare are the only one keeping this fax vendors in business, because we are still heavy users of fax. I don't know of any other industry.
Yes.
But I think the points touched by Besa are all very relevant. I kind of alluded to earlier, right? We deal with this slightly different landscape in terms of that we can confine the data, because that data is also needed for patient care, which is really our primary mission and vision, right? So then we go through all the system processes, we go through all of our defenses that talk about it. Again, boils down to user behavior. And then I'll add one more dimension to it. Most healthcare organizations are not developer organizations. So we buy products. We rely on our vendors to bring products to us. So one is we are kind of dependent on them to ensure they are safeguarding the information, they're keeping it protected. They're not leaving any loopholes. Second important aspect of healthcare, Besa touched on it, we deal with so many other external parties. These are our third-party vendors, these are our government agencies, regulatory agencies, where we have a need to exchange data or rely on their data to deliver our care. So that is a big challenge for healthcare, the third-party risk management. As I said earlier, I can shore up my defenses. I can ensure everything is slick and clean in my environment. We are following the policies and procedures. We want to make sure that our third-party vendors are following the same. They're encrypting the data in motion, encrypting the data at rest. They have all the safeguards to protect my data, because the liability still remains mine. And one other aspect with healthcare, which is unique, is the medical devices. just think about them as IoT, but they're not exactly IoTs, but they again carry critical data. Many of them, now there's federal regulation that they are supposed to provide us updates. Many of them really are still running older, obsolete operating systems. So that is one area where healthcare has a challenge. We cannot operate without them, and they are integrated in our environment. We just need to make sure they are safe, secure, and we put enough safeguards around them to keep our organization safe.
Great inputs in there. So next question is on AI, right? Like, I mean, the entire world is talking about AI, ChatGPT. So from your view, how can we leverage this? I know with ChatGPT, like, you can create a malware, or you can create any unwanted code and everything, right? But how can we make it useful from the cybersecurity perspective? How can we take the benefit of you leveraging ChatGPT to protect an organization from any cyber attacks? Inder?
So I don't know if I would say leverage ChatGPT, but we are already leveraging AI. The ChatGPT and what, so to say, generative AI is the buzzword since last 10, 11 months. But AI has been prevalent in our organization, in our endpoint detection and response tool, in our SIM product. So we've been using AI for several other factors, not definitely generative AI. How we can use it, the unfortunate part is how we can use it is the same way that threat actors can use it. And suddenly they have much more capacity to do like a DDoS attack or any of the brute force attacks, because it could be a smart attack coming our way. I think it's upon us to figure out, again, we're not developing those tools. The vendors who are developing those tools, it's upon them also to create the antidote for the AI-based attack. We definitely want to leverage it. In my non-cybersecurity environment, I am looking at several opportunities to leverage generative AI for clinical efficiency, for better patient care. Again, those are the products either we are developing or we're relying on vendor. So I would say federal government came up with the guidelines yesterday for everyone developing AI products. I think that needs to be regulated, enforced, and then the side effect of that, if it creates any sort of cybersecurity data loss or PII risk, then that needs to be addressed and plugged right away.
Great insight. So next question is on, see, any business owner, right? I mean, they definitely want their product to be like, released. There is always a compromise, right? Like, I mean, they not following all the security best practices. They may not be doing SAST or DAST and other, the security testing. So how do you convince the business owner that this is a really important step, even though there is a delay in, moving the code to the production, that this is an important step? Maybe Howard, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, sure. I think it comes down to having those standards and those policies in place that are all agreed to. If you have a review process, if you're talking about bringing on a new vendor, whether that's a vendor review process, if you're talking about code, maybe that's a static code review application or a static code review process. As long as you have that built into the policy and it's all agreed at the correct level, then the business owner will comply with those policies and will understand why they need to be applied. If they feel that the process or the policy that's being applied is not conducive to what they're trying to do, then that's a discussion, and you should be able to explain quite clearly why what you're doing does bring that security benefit. If you can't explain clearly why what you're doing is bringing the security benefit, then there may be a question about how you're approaching what you're doing.
Great, thanks, Howard. Maybe Besa, one question to you is, so how do you deal with the users who use their personal device for the official purposes, right? So number one, how do you protect? And number two, how do you give them the right kind of awareness, saying like, I mean, why it is important for them to have a tools like MDM or some kind of controls in place?
So I think in my case, actually kind of separating, work and personal life. So we've issued or our organization, our staff devices, really having a strong bring your own device policy. And even within your bring your own device policy, kind of locking down. So PII or PHI information cannot be downloaded. I know, especially now there's new technologies where you could have 2 lines within the same phone. So even though they have their personal device, they would like to use their personal device, we could actually create a separate line and kind of within their personal phone block out organizational practices and put those security aspects in their own devices as well. Is definitely a challenge, but also that's a finance related thing within organizations. How do you do this in a way that makes sense and also doesn't bust budgets? I think having everybody have a personal organizational laptop, organizational cell phone is not always the most optimal thing financially. So really finding a way to work with the end user and figuring out a way to make whatever data the organization has secure and protected. I think those are key important components.
Amazing. So thank you all. Thank you so much for joining this, the panel discussion and sharing your valuable insights. It's really helpful on some of the aspects are really helpful, and we'll definitely make sure these are passed on to others, and that some of the best practices are implemented. Thank you so much. Have a very great day, and thank you participants for joining this call. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Kannan.
Thank
Moderating.
you.
Thank you to my fellow panelists. It's great.
Bye.
Have a good day.